Good afternoon. I just wanted to go over a few things with you this week. I know I'm late in getting my video up. Just wanted to talk with you guys. Week 4, we're here. How do we get all the way to week 4? But we are. And just go over what we're going to talk about this week. I'm still having problems with videos that have been put up. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a lecture and talk with you guys about goal setting theory. You will have the PowerPoints. They're the ones that I posted last week, and you can look at those. But there's been a lot of empirical research when it comes to goal setting theory. We know that it works. And we know that if you have specific goals, it leads to an increased performance. And we know also that if you have difficult goals, when they're accepted, it results in better outcomes and easier goals, or those that do your best. So we also know that self-generated feedback is a more powerful motivator than externally generated feedback. We also know that there's influences on goal performance relationship. You have to have commitment. There's task characteristics, and then national culture also plays a role when it comes to goal setting. All of you have probably heard about SMART goals, and you may have studied those at some point in time in your life. When we talk about SMART goals, the S stands for specific, M stands for measurable, A stands for attainable, R stands for realistic or relative, and then T stands for timely. So we know that you've got to have specific goals that are out there. And there also, it helps if you have participation with your goals. If you really ask your people and ask them for feedback, and then to have that time period where it's really an explicit time period where you can measure it, and then really important is just give some performance feedback to people that they understand the goals. Self-efficacy theory, that refers to an individual's belief that they're capable of performing a task. And you really want people to have a mastery with that, and for them to realize that they can be capable of performing that task. You can do that through different techniques. You can do it through modeling, where someone else, they see you do the task, or they see a task, and so that way they feel like they can do that task as well. Equity theory, and I've got a video on equity theory, and you guys can watch that. It's really interesting. And that's where the employee looks at it, and they weigh what they put into a job, the situation, the input of it against what they get from it, which is the outcome. And then they compare that income-outcome ratio with their input outcome ratio of relevant others. And when I talk about that, that's the problem a lot of times is people we have to talk about the relevant type of person or relevant others. So basically what it's saying is that your employees are going to make comparisons, and that really believes about what they center around what they believe to be fair. And a lot of times they don't, when they're looking at equity theory, they may not put themselves up against the right person. So you have to make sure that they're measuring their efforts against the appropriate person within the organization. And I tell you, if people feel like situations are unequitable, or their inequity is occurring, the employee, they really become unhappy, and you've heard people say, well, that's not fair, or that person gets it, I don't get it, and they have to shift through that and make appropriate decisions based on it. We also know that choices are made whenever they perceive inequity. And what happens is they might change their inputs. They also might change their outputs. What they want to do is they want to change their ratio, and they want to make it more equal. A lot of times your employees have distorted perceptions of themselves. They might inflate their opinion of themselves or think they're more valuable to the organization than they are. They might distort the perception of others. And then a lot of times you have to tell them, look, you need to choose another person to, you can't compare yourself to the president of the organization. You're two different people in two different positions. But what most people do in cases where they view something as inequitable is they just leave the field. They quit their job. They move on to something else. And when inequities occur, that employee is going to make attempts to correct it. And the problem is, again, who do you refer yourself to? Who's your referent? Who do you see yourself as equal? And then how do you define your inputs and outputs? We all think that we're the hardest working person at our organization. Are we? So you have to think about that, and you can't compare yourself maybe to another department, and just being careful when you do that. And I'm looking at it with your employees and helping your employees understand that of the equity theory of who, again, that they look at and who they refer themselves to. You also need to understand that all these theories that we've talked about, Maslow, McClellan, goal setting, all of them the last couple of weeks, when it comes to motivation, that most motivation theories were developed in the U.S. So it's about Americans, developed about Americans. So it doesn't necessarily hold true when you go into a foreign country. I don't know if any of you have traveled internationally, but I've worked in Italy, I've worked in France, dealing with students, dealing with employers there, and just the differences of doing business there and how they view it. Some countries more formal than what we're accustomed to. They see the United States as very casual in our attitudes, and it's hard sometimes for us as we try to converse with them. And we have to realize that not all cultures are going to be the same characteristics as American culture. So we can't go into that country assuming that they will do business the way that we do business. So we have to be aware of that. And cultures desire other situations in work are going to be more attractive to them. In the United States, time off, but in other countries, it's a different scenario in what they look at. Or say in France, a 4-day work week is comparable, but that would never go here. And in China, they don't mind working you 7 days a week. So that's just something to think of with our motivation theories. Next week, you will have lecture videos again, PowerPoints, and I apologize. But this week, you've got your video to watch on equity theory. You have a motivation paper. And so it will just, you can look at the different motivation theories, incorporate those into your paper. Remember with your papers that it needs to, you're going to have an introduction, you're going to have a conclusion, you're going to have a body of work in between that, a thesis statement, and you're going to, this one you don't have to really have any articles cited, so that's not required in this, but you'll need to refer back to your textbook and look at the motivation theories and see what Joyce Oslin needs to do to motivate her employees, and go through that within the motivation paper. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Again, review your PowerPoint slides from last week, and we're halfway through the course, guys. Call me, email me at lpowell@uu.edu if you have any questions, and have a great week, and I look forward to reading your papers. Thanks so much.